continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So, as mentioned earlier, Trump is scheduled to be sentenced by Judge Merchan tomorrow. Here we are again. It seems like we've had the same discussion intermittently over the last few months about the possible punishment that will be meted out against Trump. Merchan declining Trump's appeals as to sentencing. As have higher courts now, he's appealed to the United States Supreme Court to intervene, and we'll see if they do here in the 11th hour. A good piece Byron York offered up on the topic over at the Washington Examiner this week. Merchan's decision. Why has he decided to sentence Trump to make a point? Here's what Merchan said in rejecting the latest appeal. Here, 12 jurors unanimously found the defendant guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records with the intent to defraud, which included an intent to commit or conceal a conspiracy to promote a presidential election by unlawful means. It was the premeditated and continuous deception by the leader of the free world that is the gravamen of this offense. Sounds serious. 12 jurors unanimously found defendant guilty of 35 counts of falsifying business records with the intent to defraud, included an intent to commit or conceal a conspiracy to promote a presidential election by unlawful means. Well, Berkeley law professor and friend of the show, John Yoo, picked up a point that I'm sure will be obvious to officers of the court listening to this. His comments, said you, show that the whole purpose of the case was not to correct a bookkeeping fraud, but to punish Trump for his 2016 campaign, which is forbidden under federal law because that is the federal government's job. Judge Merchan and Alvin Bragg has no place with respect to federal election law. By his own unintended admission, he says this is about the 2016 campaign, which is beyond his authority. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, as well as text line. Now, that doesn't mean that he still won't hand down a sentence, but it is very much like this idea of deferring prosecution of Trump for crimes committed, putting a toll on the prosecution. This case would be the punishment until 4 years from now. I mean, does anybody believe that Trump is going to be led away in cuffs to begin serving his sentence tomorrow? Or he's going to have a jail sentence imposed and he'll be on bail pending appeal? Be very interesting to see what Merchan does here, because on the one hand you say, well, that would be a grotesque absurdity and the country wouldn't stand for it. On the other hand, if Merchan gave him a slap on the wrist, as we've talked about previously, then what was this all about? I thought this was a serious crime. 34 felony convictions, and he walks with a fine or probation?
And then, if the Supreme Court doesn't rule in his favor, is he going to show up for the hearing? Because if he doesn't, then he has to appear via Zoom. Or just not go at all. I mean, can he do that? Just not show up because this is a kangaroo court? It's a joke?
No, he should be there. And he will be there one form or the other, I'm certain.
I hope if he's going to be there, go in person then. Look him eye to eye, man to man.
100%, I agree. Will Chamberlain is senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. Will, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us what we can expect tomorrow in your view.
Well, first off, it depends on whether or not the Supreme Court is
Yes,
going to put
right.
a stay on the sentencing. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think it actually will. I think the Supreme Court will stop this. Assuming it doesn't happen, the Judge Merchant, I think, he made it possible for President Trump to appear virtually, which indicates he's not really looking at a jail sentence. He also said in his order and tipped his hand that the likely sentence here is going to be what's called an unconditional discharge, which is effectively no punishment, no conditions, no probation, no jail, no fine. That might seem like a win, but it's sort of an inevitable consequence of the fact that Trump is about to be president. And any attempt to impose punishment on him would likely just get an injunction stopping it, and then get reversed by an appellate court, either in New York or federally. So I think ultimately what it is, it's an attempt for Merchant to kind of preserve the fact that he got this conviction, or rather that he managed to preside over a trial in which Trump was convicted. He doesn't want it tossed, and his time to actually impose a sentence is constrained by the fact that there's no way he'll be allowed to sentence a sitting president of the United States. So he's just trying to rush this through before the inauguration, and preserve the legitimacy of the trial that he oversaw. But I think it'll, if the sentencing ends up happening tomorrow, it'll end up being kind of a formality, and President Trump will ultimately get sentenced to just nothing, an unconditional discharge.
But he would still be a convicted felon, or at that point he would be a convicted felon, and then this is a permanent stain on his record until and unless there was executive action taken on the topic.
Correct. Although, he was under New York law, it seems like he was a convicted felon the moment the jury entered their verdict. That's different from
federal law.
Jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But different from federal law. But under New York law, they say if you have a jury guilty verdict, you're convicted, even if the sentence hasn't been passed yet. So the other side of this, if there's like a silver lining, is that you can't appeal until a sentence is imposed, and so this will give President Trump the opportunity to appeal the myriad errors that were made by Judge Merchant at trial.
Well, and remind us of the crime and who the victims are in this one.
The crime he was convicted of was something called falsification of business records. There were no victims. That's really quite obvious. Understand the actual substance of what's being charged here is that Donald Trump directed somebody to enter the wrong entry in a drop-down menu in QuickBooks. It's not really obvious exactly how to categorize an expense like the one he incurred when he paid Stormy Daniels. Calling it a legal expense when you're talking about an NDA agreement is actually a pretty reasonable thing to call it.
Right.
So I think it wasn't. I doubt it was even falsified in the first instance. Even if it was falsified, I doubt he was actually aware of it. Like, this is not the kind of thing he would care about. So I think in general, the entire theory of the case is just absurd. But it's the kind of case that only gets brought because you have both prosecutors and a judge who are just deeply motivated to manufacture a felony and pin it on Trump, even though, even the progressive legal analysts were saying that this was easily the most ridiculous of the prosecutions and should never have been brought.
Right. The prospect of deferring punishment, like there was a desire from the lawfare practitioners on the left to defer prosecution until after his second term. If we couldn't get him after his first term, maybe we can get him after his second term. Do you have any concern about the prospect of that?
No, I don't think that's viable at all. I think that, basically, I think what President Trump's team wants is the opportunity to appeal the immunity issues first, and then have to get to resolve, if there's a sentencing, resolve it during his term when he's president. And I think one thing that I think Merchant is probably wary about is he doesn't want to have to sentence Trump during his term, and also he's wary if he tried to hold the whole thing in abeyance, like hold the jury verdict over Trump's head for 4 years, as
right.
Alvin Bragg wanted him to do. That what Trump could easily do then is during his term go to an appellate court and get a writ of mandamus, basically forcing Merchant to then attempt to sentence him during his term or throughout the trial. Because I think Trump would have a pretty compelling argument that there's no legitimacy to holding a conviction over a guy's head for 4 years and then waiting until 2029 to sentence him. That's absurd, and a violation of due process.
I don't know if you were on when I referenced what Berkeley law professor John Yoo had to say, but part of the argument against Merchant is based on his own reasoning in his latest denial of the appeal on sentencing, talking about the intent to defraud related to the 2016 presidential election. And Professor Yoo says his comments show the whole purpose of the case was not to correct bookkeeping fraud, but to punish Trump for his 2016 campaign, which is forbidden under federal law. That's the federal government's job. So he's outside of his scope.
Right.
By his own
Correct.
reasoning.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely right. I think, there's so many distinct legal errors that happened at this trial. I mean, there's also, the obvious presidential immunity issue. It didn't seem, people were initially skeptical that presidential immunity would play a role here because obviously the relevant conduct happened before Trump took office, or the charged conduct rather. But they introduced evidence of his official acts to prove intent. And at the time, Trump's lawyers were like, whoa, you can't do that. That's not admissible for immunity reasons.
Right.
And they were right. So the whole trial has to be tossed for that reason, and yet Merchant refused to do anything. I mean, I think it's been clear from the get-go that Judge Merchant has been doing everything in his power to keep this conviction in place and keep, basically try and preserve the trial because and is it any surprise why? Like, the guy's daughter is a Democrat political operative whose firm has taken money from any number of Democrat candidates, including, I believe, by the Biden-Harris 2020 campaign. So, yeah, I mean, these are political people, and they're, ultimately they're deeply conflicted. It's quite obvious that, there's a reasonable threat to be made against Merchant's daughter in the sense that, like, if Merchant doesn't rule the way that Democrats would prefer, that they could have siphoned off, they could have cut off all the funds to his daughter's company.
Right.
This never should have gone forward.
Well, this does seem extremely personal. But when the new DOJ comes in, Pam Bondi, is there anything that they can get Alvin Bragg and Judge Merchant on?
I mean, it's tricky. I think that, obviously they need to be looking at both 18 U.S.C. 241 conspiracy against rights and 18 U.S.C. 242, which is, I think it's violating somebody's civil rights under the color of law. They need to be looking at both. For Judge Merchant, there are broad immunity, essentially not immunity provisions, but immunity rules that basically judicial immunity is very, very strong. It's very hard to prosecute judges for their official judicial acts, and probably for good reason. Ultimately, it's just, you could, there is a world where there's a lot more lawsuits against judges, and it really freezes the system entirely. So I understand why those rules exist, but they do make it challenging to prosecute Judge Merchant on these things. Bragg, I'm a little bit, there might be more of an opportunity to. I don't think prosecutors have the same level of protection in terms of immunity as judges. But all this should be looked into. Absolutely should be looked into. And moreover, I think that, if you can't prosecute Alvin Bragg for this specific act, then really, there should be a full 360-degree view of Mr. Bragg's activities. That's exactly what they did to President Trump. You remember that both Bragg and Letitia James ran for political office on the promise of getting Trump, which is an obscene thing to do and totally offensive to American notions of the rule of law. Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. They're going to do it to Mr. Trump. We should do it to them, just as, to deter any future prosecutor from thinking about doing something similar.
And some of those politicians, too, like the newly minted recipient of the Presidential Citizens Medal, I would include in that.
Yeah. No, Miss Cheney. Yeah, she and, it looks like she tampered with a witness in the middle of her hearing. She should certainly be, and she made a whole bunch of Republicans spend a whole bunch of money on lawyers and then put in place, this utterly sham presentation, out of her personal pique and her personal hatred for Donald Trump. Yeah, she said, I think Mike made a really good point when he said that Liz Cheney might be the first person to be awarded for, a presidential medal and then prosecuted for the exact same conduct.
Oh,
yeah, right.
That's good.
She'll have to trade it in to get a poster Rita Hayworth for the cell from Red. The other matter, though, too, on this with respect to the review, preemptive pardons. Biden telling the USA Today in his exit interview that he tried to warn Trump not to do preemptive or not to go after Fauci and Cheney and so on and so forth. And so, but since he didn't get a clear commitment from Trump, he's still considering preemptive pardons. If he does move for preemptive pardons for those individuals and or others, is that something that, the Article 3 project or the DOJ should challenge?
No, I mean, honestly, I doubt we would. And legally, I don't think. I mean, obviously, it's a massive abuse of the pardon power. But the Constitution, I mean, the pardon power is plenary. It's vested in the president. There's no. You put this in front of the judge, they dismiss it as frivolous right away because they just say a judge has no role whatsoever in determining, in evaluating the legitimacy of a pardon. It's just a power that they have.
So the only questionable, in your view, then the only questionable limit on, and this is a question, the limit on the president's pardon power would be for himself.
That's the only possible limit. I guess there's also the question. I mean, you could argue that it was the subject of a bribe, right? And that that's the one thing that is specifically spelled out in the Constitution. But you'd have to allege a bribe of some sort. But otherwise, I don't think any of these preemptive pardons would be challengeable. But ultimately, that's if Biden does it, fine, right? We'll be in a new world where there's just blanket pardons for everybody in the administration going into the next one. And query whether that's not a better world than the one where everybody prosecutes everybody else after they're gone. We have to. I'm of the belief that Republicans have to be willing to use lawfare because Democrats did it, right? We can't unilaterally disarm. But in a world where everybody, basically the way that part of the transition between presidencies was just a default pardon of the previous administration, so that the next one wouldn't go after them. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe that's actually a better thing overall for the stability of the country. Because the lawfare, both in the first Trump term and then through the Biden term, has been really corrosive to our country, I think. And it needs to be deterred. But a world where we could snap our fingers and have it all go away would probably be a better world.
Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel at the Article 3 Project. Will, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank, a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
I'm Scott Bartmus, co-founder of ESCO, a security and fire alarm services business, and a customer of Signature Bank. We work hard to give our customers peace of mind, so it's nice to know that while we have our customers' backs, partners like Signature Bank have ours. When COVID hit, there was a lot of uncertainty for many businesses, particularly surrounding the PPP loan program, with parameters and deadlines changing constantly. The executives from Signature Bank worked weekends alongside their staff, filling out and submitting applications to ensure they took care of us. That type of dedication is hard to find, but we found it with Signature Bank.
Signature Bank helps local businesses succeed. Want to learn how Signature Bank can help turn your business vision into reality? Call Signature Bank at 773-467-5600 or visit signaturebank.bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Oh, I look forward to it every morning, taking Balance of Nature. Why? Not getting enough fruits and veggies on my own, and that's where Balance of Nature comes in. In fact, I had 0 double goose eggs of fruits and vegetables yesterday, so that's why I take Balance of Nature. 6 capsules a day provides your body, heart, and mind with several servings of 31 different whole fruits and vegetables. You get 3 fruit capsules, 3 vegetable capsules, and voila, it does make a difference. So order your bottles of fruits and veggies today. Call 800-246-8751. 800-246-8751. Use coupon code Chicago to save 35% and free shipping. Or you can